Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our special council meeting for Wednesday, June the 10th. I apologize in advance that we will be doing a little procedural gymnastics this evening. We are starting now with a special council meeting. At 6:30, we will recess that meeting and go into our statutory public meeting for 2 items. This is required because notice had been sent out and we'd advertised a time, so we need to stick to it as closely as possible. Once we've finished the planning public meeting, then we will reconvene the special council meeting agenda for this evening. So thank you for those who are here and those who are watching online. I'd like to advise you that this meeting is being audio and video recorded and live streamed on the Town of Innisfil's YouTube channel and shall form part of the record, which will be retained according to the town's retention bylaw. I'd also like to ask anyone who is here this evening and has their cell phone with them or any electronic device, if you could put it on mute or on vibrate, that would be helpful in not interrupting the proceedings. And we have quorum with full council here tonight, so I'll call the meeting to order, and I will ask Councillor Zanella to deliver the land acknowledgement statement.
The Town of Innisfil acknowledges that the Town of Innisfil is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. The town also acknowledges that this land is the traditional territories of the first people of Turtle Island, and it is shared between the Anishinaabe peoples of Bosalea First Nation, Chippewas of Rama First Nation, and Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, and we thank them for their generous generations of stewardship. This meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people, and as settlers, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The town acknowledges the forced sacrifices that are the foundation of Canadian society today. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zanella. Now we'll go to item 2, an open forum. Are there any items in open forum? We did. We had 3 people sign up for open forum this evening. So we'll start with Ray Duhamel. And just a reminder to everybody that the open forum comments are limited to 2 minutes, if you can. Thank you, Mr. Duhamel, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, members of council. My name is Ray Duhamel with Jones Consulting. I'm presenting this evening on behalf of Parkbridge Lifestyle Communities, and they own hundreds of hectares of land within the Sandy Cove settlement area boundary. And we're making on their behalf 2 requests as it relates to item 6.3 in your agenda this evening, which is your consideration of your new official plan. Parkbridge's 2 requests, I think, are easily implementable and are relatively minor changes to the document if you were to so agree and direct staff to change. The first is that Parkbridge owns a vacant parcel of land on the north side of Lockhart Road, east of the 25th Side Road. You may have known, I've been before you on that parcel known as Lake Haven North. It's a parcel of land that is subject to a special policy, and that policy is, for your reference, is 5.7.11. And that policy allows for, in addition to the retirement area policies, it also allows for development to occur within the low density 1 land use designation. Our request is pretty straightforward. It would request that the words "and 2" be added to that policy. So that would allow for development to occur within the low density 1 and the low density 2 designations. So that's the first request. The second, which is related to that, is Parkbridge also owns 2 other large greenfield parcels west of the 25th Side Road. Again, within Sandy Cove. We're not talking about a settlement area expansion. We're talking about policy change effectively. They own 2 parcels, one's on the north side of Lockhart and the one's on the south side of Lockhart. And what they'd ask is that that same special policy, which is 5.7.11, again for your reference, hopefully, as if you agree to modify same, to apply to their other 2 parcels within the Sandy Cove settlement area as well. And the basis for all of this request is fairly straightforward from their perspective, is number 1, to have a common policy framework apply to all 3 of their parcels, so that they can plan accordingly as they move forward with development options on their lands. And then the second is that the request for the low density 1 and 2 designation is to simply allow for a little bit more flexibility on the land use, all ground-oriented housing styles, but a little more flexibility on the development of those lands. So again, I think it's fairly straightforward. I wrote that to you in a letter that I wrote on Monday. Hopefully you have that letter, and I would be happy to answer any questions. I think I'm under 2 minutes, so I practiced to make sure because I tend to talk a little bit too long.
Thank you, Mr. Duhamel. Much appreciated. We don't usually do questions
Okay,
with open forum, but having heard that, when we get to that item, if people have questions, they'll ask at that time.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker on open forum is Oksana Arkito. I'm sorry, I probably said that wrong. And Bogdan. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, fellow residents of Innisfil. My name is Dr. Oksana Arkito, and this is my husband, Bogdan Jurevich, and we're the owners of the property located at 2108 Side Road 20. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We're asking the council to consider the inclusion of our property within the proposed settlement area boundary expansion. Our property is situated in an area that is already surrounded by existing and planned urban development. To the south of our property, there's a bank. To the east, there's a retail plaza, the No Frills Plaza, I think. To the west, there's a small business, the animal hospital. In addition, the land directly north of our property is proposed to be included within the expansion area and designated for urban commercial use. Given these surrounding land uses, our property represents a logical and appropriate candidate for inclusion within the settlement area boundary expansion. Including our property would create a more consistent and coordinated boundary while supporting orderly and efficient growth in the area of Innisfil. And then we would like to also find out why our property was singled out. All the land around us is C4 commercial use. Our property is right on the intersection of Alcona entrance, right across from Welcome to Alcona sign. There's a bank right across from our property. It's the main intersection, Welcome to Alcona. So why does it look on the map like it's the only little square that's excluded? In this high traffic and high representation area that is still rural commercial, which limits a lot what we were planning to do with this property. We have 2 teenage daughters. We are planning to develop this to our vision, but we're very limited by what it's designated as rural commercial. We've had this property for 15 years, so we've been doing this for a long time. Given the opportunity, we would like to develop the land into a small commercial retail plaza, providing maybe a wellness, beauty services, or snacks and some store. Thank you so much for your time, for your service to the community, and your consideration of our comments this evening. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Oksana, very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Corey Chisholm. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Chisholm.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan and members of council. My name's Corey Chisholm, partner with MHBC Planning in Barrie. I'm here before you this evening on behalf of our client, who has lands recommended to be included within the settlement area boundary expansions through the town's official plan update. We recognize that there's a long agenda this evening, so we will keep our comments brief. We just want to confirm that we have submitted a letter of support for town staff's recommended official plan update and settlement area boundary expansions earlier today. We appreciate the opportunity to continue working collaboratively with town council and town staff as we continue to progress the important planning on these lands for the area. We'd also like to acknowledge and commend town staff's efforts on this process over the last few years. So with that, we thank you and we support the recommendation tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm. That concludes our open forum segment for this evening. So we'll now go to the recommendation to approve the agenda as printed. And that's moved by Councillor Drudge and seconded by Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? That is carried. Next, I'm going to ask if there's any disclosures of pecuniary interest on any item on tonight's agenda. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. I am declaring a need to step aside when item 6.3, the Innisfil official plan update, is discussed. I have a direct pecuniary interest as my son and daughter-in-law own a property on the 9th line, which is recommended to be put into the settlement area. And I've provided the proper form to clerks.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else with a conflict or pecuniary interest on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, if one becomes apparent to you through the meeting, please let us know at that time. Next, we will go to our delegations, and we had a delegation from Darren Vella from IPS and Marvin Geist. Whenever you're ready, sir. Delegations are also held to a maximum of 10 minutes. And thank you for adhering to that in advance, Mr. Geist.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. I appear this evening on behalf of DLR with regard to their property on Bel Air Beach Road. That's 1194 and 1224 Bel Air. Your Worship, further to our deputation of May 20th, we met with town staff regarding our proposal to have our clients' lands included in the settlement area boundary of Lefroy and Bellewaerde. We are of the opinion that on the merits, this is a special application in that our client has the ability to address and substantially rectify the long-standing flooding issues affecting the Bel Air Beach area, Maple Road, and Ewart Street, and that subdivision bounded by Balsam, Spooners Road, and Temple. Again, each application that comes before you stands on its own merits. Recently, Council approved your community planning permit system, which has 3 separate stages for an application. Each application has its own merits and is treated on its own merits. Depending on those merits of the application, one can have a permit issued immediately if it complies with all matters. That's a stage 1 application. A stage 2 application has staff has the jurisdiction and the delegated authority based on the facts to issue a permit. Or there is a 3rd stage, and that's where, depending on the facts, the application would go before council for a recommendation. Not all applications are treated the same, but everyone has their own distinct issues that must be addressed. Each application is not treated the same. And depending on that situation, I'm repeating it again, each application speaks for itself. The matter before you this evening speaks for itself and should stand alone as significant benefits can be achieved for the community. In Latin, we would say, res ipsa loquitur. That's what we used to talk about in law school. The thing speaks for itself. It screams out for attention. And that's what we have before you tonight. The development on lands in Bel Air, which can rectify a serious health issue. We respectfully suggest to you that these lands and surrounding lands, due to its historical flooding situation, must stand on its own merits. And we should not have to wait until 2051 to alleviate an existing health and hazardous issue. Both the town's official plan and the minister's zoning order identify my client's lands as part of the future settlement area, and the planning framework even contemplates the extension of Webster Avenue through my client's property. But again, we have to wait 25 years for this to happen when it can be addressed now. The principle of development on the DLR lands has already been established by your own documents. Our development, at no cost to the town, will remedy the flooding situation in the area. It is a perfect example of what the red tape ministry reduction is all about. Their mission is as follows. The Ministry of Red Tape Reduction's mission is to make life easier for people and businesses by cutting unnecessary, outdated, or duplicative regulations while still protecting the health, safety, and the environment. The red tape legislation aims to streamline the process, to provide services faster and make them more accessible. It removes barriers that slow down innovation, investment, and job creation. It ensures regulations are clear, modern, and effective without adding unnecessary costs or delays. In short, their focus is on reducing administrative burdens so Ontario's economy can grow and residents can access services more effectively, all while maintaining strong protection for the public and the environment. Now is the time to address an existing flooding problem in Bel Air. And we have our own MPP who understands the flooding issue through the red tape legislation. Now, recently, the provincial planning statement policies were amended. Policy number 22 states, municipalities are to permit and facilitate all housing options required to meet current and projected needs. Municipalities are to permit and facilitate residential intensification, redevelopment, and development that creates net increases in housing units. Settlement areas are the focus of growth and development. Together, these policies create a strong argument that municipalities must actively plan for housing supply rather than simply preserving existing boundaries. The PPS 2024 settlement area expansion provisions require decision makers to consider certain criteria, including a need for additional land to accommodate growth. Look at agriculture and its impacts. Look at phasing and how the development can benefit the municipality. Notice the wording of the policy. It says that you shall consider these matters. The former growth plan framework imposed more restrictions than the tests that we have now. Several planning law commentaries have noted that the PPS 2024 removed many of the previous preconditions for boundary expansions.
2 minutes, Mr. Geist.
I'm almost there. Innisfil's own official plan contains language favoring development that is contiguous to existing settlement boundaries and proceeds to a logical progression. Our request cuts red tape and we are consistent with the aforesaid legislation. We provided your staff with a term sheet in good faith, and I believe all of you have seen this term sheet and what we can do for the municipality through agreements and various types of agreements. The term sheet reveals that my client has agreed to contribute funding or in-kind work for the portion of the Bel Air Flood Diversion Project located on their property. The term sheet, based on the ER and the DLR improvements, would upgrade the existing Bel Air Creek channel. There would be construction of a flow splitter or alternative stormwater management control at the western limit of the property. There would be construction of a bypass biofiltration channel in accordance with approved engineering plans. All of this term sheet sets out what we can do for the town if we're allowed to do it. And we would be allowed to do it through the planning process. We will save the town $2,651,000 in costs. These are costs that you would normally have to pay to alleviate the flooding problems. But we have agreed, here it is, that we will pay for that. Now, all of these matters would be codified in agreements, site plan agreements, subdivision agreements, DC charge agreements, and we would, of course, put up the necessary letters of credit to ensure and guarantee that the works would be done. I mean, that's what we did for IDAG. When you wanted the sewage plant expanded, we came up with $290 million. We did that.
Can you wrap up, Mr. Geist?
Two more paragraphs, short ones. Your worship, members of council, to approve our client's request to alleviate and rectify the flooding conditions in this area, I suggest is in the public interest. It supports the ministry's red tape reduction and its mission statement. It supports the new provincial planning statements. In conclusion, we look forward to working with the town with regard to flood mitigation measures, and we look forward to having these lands included in the settlement area of Belleurt, Lefroy, and Bel Air. The benefits to the town, its ratepayers, and especially those who reside in Bel Air's flooded area, speak for themselves. These benefits deserve to be given to the residents, and DLR will pay for that. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Geist. Questions or comments for Mr. Geist? Councillor Waters.
Thanks for your presentation. A question, there are many property owners in there that are required to implement the Greenland design. My question, does your client own the actual wetland where all this water has to be diverted to?
Yes.
They do?
Yeah. The lands that abut Bel Air Beach Road, all those wetlands, if you look at the plan that I gave you a few weeks ago, 6 months ago, the wetland is part of our lands on the Bel Air Beach Road, just east of just west of Temple Avenue. And those wetlands will be retained as wetlands.
I'm just going to ask for some clarification, because the wetland that's chosen for the diversion is on the northeast of the property.
There are two of them. There's one on the north, which is being used by the Orbit near the 6th line, which comes down into the Bel Air channel. And then there's ours, which is south. If I had a slide or if I had the plan here, I can show you. But there's a major block on our land that is designated, and it will remain as wetlands.
Okay, and just for further clarification, is that south wetland also being used as part of the diversion in terms of where water will go?
It is
Or just-
it is part of it, yes.
I was on the impression it was just the very, very large wetland to the northeast,
No,
because,
no, sir. If you look at the plan that I gave you, it specifically shows the retained wetland.
okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the Greenland design,
Oh, wow.
and it looks like the,
You should look at our plans, sir.
Okay.
It's site-specific.
right, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments for Mr. Geist? Councillor Zanella.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just to be clear, no other landowner would have to be on board for anything that this development would do if they were building or doing the, what you're proposing?
The majority of the flooding correction is on our lands, but there is a channel to the north, which is part of the orbit, all right? And that's another component of the flooding remediation plan.
So without that, you wouldn't be able to proceed?
No, we could still proceed, but we might have to proceed in stages to ensure that, you know, all that water doesn't go into the one area. It's supposed to be split.
Okay, thank you.
But we can proceed with our plan, and if, meeting with the town and the engineers, if it had to be done in phases, we would do it in phases. And you would have the security in place to ensure that we complete what we promised to do.
Thank you.
Councillor Constantine.
My question is directed to the staff. By including this land, does it actually present an opportunity to solve an existing problem? The developer has committed to completely mitigating the flooding issues before a single foundation is poured. This means we can take a piece of flood-prone land and turn it into safe property at no cost to the taxpayer.
Director Lee, I think that was directed, I think you'd be the appropriate.
It was Mayor Dolan. I'm wondering if it's more appropriate for that question to actually be answered when we deal with the staff report, which is later in the agenda.
Is that all right with you, Councillor Constantine? Thank you. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Geist? I'll go to Councillor Drodge and then Councillor Saunders.
Thanks, Your Worship. That $2.6 million that the developer was willing to submit and help pay for, is that just pertaining to those lands, or is that the project as a whole?
Well, what I have in front of me is the term sheet. And the term sheet says, under the current EA, DLR has committed to the Bel Air flood diversion project will result in the following savings to the town. Based on 2019 EA cost analysis. Land acquisition, $1 million. Bel Air Creek enhancement, $35,000. 6-meter easement over the channel, $50,000. Diversion structure and channel, $413,000. Channel construction and berming, $718,000. Green infrastructure biofiltration channel, $434,815. Based on this option, South Alcona flood reduction cost analysis estimates savings to the town equals $2,651,653, and that's what DLR will pay for just that portion.
Thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Saunders?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm under the understanding that town has been negotiating with this developer for numerous years to get onto the lands and have work started or have plans started. Why is it all of a sudden now that you're pushing for it to be done when we could have started this 4 years ago, and your magical plan of having the flood mitigation stop could have stopped years ago, but now you're putting it forward now?
Why? Good question. The town, as you're aware, is undergoing its official plan review. It's my understanding that the town was not including our client's property in the official plan review because it's part of Talk 3, which is part of the orbit, which means we have to sit around for 2051. All right, now we've decided, guys, get us in. You've acknowledged that we're in Talk 3. You've acknowledged that Webster Avenue is going to go through our lands. If you want to do these things and you recognize the principle of development, then we'll work with you and we'll do what we have to do. And that's part of remedying the flooding situation. Before, they wouldn't talk to us. As a matter of fact, In-Services, I'm told, wouldn't talk to my client because we weren't in the official plan.
So you've basically, your developer has shut down the town from going on those properties when this project could have started 4 years ago, or the plans could have been done 4 years ago. But now, because you're not going into the official plan, your lands, you're still not going to let the people on the land. So if we say no to you going on to the OP, you're still not going to allow it to happen. So you're doing here or there to us, to the town. You're saying, we're going to help you out, but you have to let us in the plan. But when we want to help the residents out, you didn't want us to help the residents out. Is that correct?
No, I don't think that is correct. Okay, it is not correct, okay, in total. Part of it is, but because, as I said to you, the town wouldn't meet with us because we weren't in the settlement area, all right? They wouldn't pursue our plan. That's correct, sir, okay? They did.
Through the chair, please. Thank you.
Okay, that's my understanding, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question was more of a follow-up on Councillor George's question on costs. In your presentation, Mr. Vella made last time, he suggested you be covering all of the costs. Now, I understand we need to quantify that, and we've been doing that through these estimates from data that's 6 years old now. If we get renewed quotes on what the work will cost, would that change what the developer is willing to pay for
Yes.
the work?
Yes, sir. If costs go up, we are responsible for those costs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Drodge?
Thanks, Your Worship. This might be towards staff, but when we did our, I might get it wrong, our EA studies to come up with a plan, when we had our assessments on how we would navigate stormwater and solve the flooding issue, did DLR allow us on their property to do those studies?
Director Lee?
Mayor Dolan, I will have to look back. I wasn't here when the EA study was done in terms of the scope of work. So when we get to the staff report, I can hopefully have an answer.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Geest? Seeing none, thank you very much for your delegation. And could I please have a mover and a seconder, please, to receive that delegation? Moved by Deputy Fowler, seconded by Councillor Waters. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, sir. It is now 6:33, so we will recess this meeting. Recess and go into our planning public meetings. So could I have a mover and a seconder, please, to recess? Moved by Councillor Constantine, seconded by Councillor Ices. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you for your patience this evening. We'll now move into our publicized statutory public meeting and say good evening and welcome to the public planning meeting portion for tonight. I would like to advise that this meeting is being live streamed, audio and video recorded, and shall form part of the record, which will be retained in accordance with the town's retention bylaw. And for more information about that collection, you can contact our clerk's office. Can I please have a mover and a seconder, please, to approve the agenda as circulated? Moved by Councillor Zanella, seconded by Councillor Waters. All those in favor? That is carried. We have two planning applications being brought forward tonight. The first item concerns a proposed town-wide community permit planning system bylaw and is for information and public consultation purposes only, with no decisions being made this evening. The second item regarding a proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 14176 Line is being brought forward for council's consideration this evening. If a person or body who files an appeal of a decision of the Town of Innisfil in respect of the Planning Act application and does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or written submissions to the Town of Innisfil before the proposed amendments are passed, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss all or part of your appeal. All comments or questions should be addressed through the chair, please. And oral submissions will be included in this meeting's minutes and form part of the public record, including the name and address of the speaker as information collected under the Planning Act in accordance with the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. The minutes of the meeting will be posted on the township's website. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest on either of these two items this evening? Seeing none, tonight's first item concerns a proposed town-wide community permit planning system bylaw. We'll start by hearing from the consultant on behalf of the town, and then we'll have an opportunity for the public to make an oral submission in person or virtually if you're watching live stream. All speakers will have 5 minutes to ask their questions or express their comments, and staff will respond where possible. If staff cannot respond this evening, they will provide a response in the final staff report that will be coming forward in the future. Should anyone need to speak again to address an issue that has not already been raised or to request clarification, they'll be given additional 5 minutes. After everyone's had a turn once, then you can come up for a second go if you have more that you'd like to say. After hearing from members of the public, council will have an opportunity to ask any questions or provide comments. Should any member of the public watching the live stream wish to comment, they can email Clerk Services, and these comments will be provided to council and town staff and taken into consideration before council makes a final decision. And the email address will be provided on the screen. You may also be added to the circulation list as an interested party and will be updated on any future information regarding this item. I'll now hear from the town clerk, Jennifer Marshall, about how public notice for this meeting was provided.
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice of this public meeting was provided to required agencies on May 13th, 2026, and published to Innisfil Today, also on May 13th, 2026, in accordance with the Planning Act. Information and materials respecting the draft CPPS bylaw were also posted on the town's Get Involved page.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Has any correspondence been received by Clerk Services concerning the proposed application?
Yes, Your Worship. 2 items of correspondence have been received, one from Samantha Sevilla in an email dated May 29th, 2026, and Caitlin Weber, MHBC Planning, on behalf of TransCanada Pipelines Limited, in correspondence dated June 9th, 2026. These pieces of correspondence can be found on tonight's agenda. Members of the public may provide comments or register their interest regarding this item during this meeting or up until council makes a decision by contacting the clerk's office at clerksoffice@innisfil.ca.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll now hear from David Riley, SGL Planning and Design Incorporated, who will provide a summary of the proposed bylaw. Welcome, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hello, members of council, staff, and the public. My name, as mentioned, is David Riley from SGL Planning and Design. I've been here many times speaking to you about the community planning permit bylaw, so I will try to keep this brief, but recognizing that some members of the public may not have heard this or might not be familiar with it, I will provide a brief overview of the tool and what's proposed here. So let's move on here. This is working. So this project was led by town staff alongside with the consultants, and the objective is to expand upon a tool that the town is already using, a community planning permit or CPP bylaw, I'll refer to it as that from now on, which improves essentially consistency in planning approvals and considering planning approvals, provides a clearer process going forward. So the proposal here is to expand this tool that applies today to all of the Alcona settlement area and all properties or all residential shoreline properties to the rest of the town. So it's essentially replacing your zoning bylaw. Let me just see here. Okay, so a community planning permit system is a tool that combines multiple planning processes, mainly zoning bylaw amendments, site plan control applications, and minor variance applications. There are many key benefits, and I won't go them all, but essentially it is a tool that allows for shorter approval timelines by combining those application processes I just mentioned. It can get housing and other forms of development to the market quicker, and it allows the town to set their priorities through the regulatory tool to implement the planning framework within the town. Here's some other benefits here, but I will just keep going here. This is, I'll go make sure I'm at the right slide here. I think I passed one here. There we go. So the purpose of moving toward this tool, the CPP bylaw town-wide, is to provide one consistent tool across the municipality. Right now, you've got a CPP bylaw and a zoning bylaw, very different processes. And this CPP bylaw that's in front of you has been created in line with your new OP or your updated OP that you're considering for adoption tonight. So it's implementing that policy framework. The town has already taken those important steps in this direction. Your CPP bylaw already exists. That was approved about a year ago and is in effect. It was not appealed, which is great. You had a CPP bylaw housekeeping amendment approved earlier this year in March. You've got your official plan review that's currently underway and proposed for adoption this evening. And as I mentioned, this regulatory tool is implementing that CPP bylaw direction. Let's go here to the next one. It's just being slow on me, maybe because it's a map. I'll just explain it anyway, but the maps on this slide, once they load, are showing essentially the rest of the geography of the town. It is just showing where it applies now versus the rest of the town. And I think it's frozen. I don't know if we can do anything about that. Oh, there it is. So the gray is where we're expanding into here. And there's the southern half of the town. So on these next few slides, it is explaining how the various steps. So we've got the first step of the process, which is confirming what are the application requirements for your permit application. The second step is the application submission. The third step is the application review, and then there's the decision. And I'm just going to leave it on this slide for a minute, because the key is that not every application requires the same level of review, and that's the whole basis for this tool. Smaller, more straightforward applications, these can be reviewed more efficiently. Larger applications, more complex applications, they can receive a higher level of review, and where appropriate, those can go to council for a decision. So the application classes, there's class 1 and class 2, which are delegated to staff for approval, and class 3, which go to council for approval. Applicants should be able to understand what class of permit is required. This flow chart here is actually sitting within the bylaw, and we do have some materials available on this town's website that do explain the permit classes. And I think many people in your community are already very familiar with this tool. As I've said, it's been already in existence there. But But another important matter to note are the notification requirements, because that's a little bit different in a CPP bylaw versus the traditional planning framework that we're partly working within today. So the legislation that permits a municipality to implement a CPP bylaw, that legislation actually says that you don't need any notification requirements for any permit application. With that said, in practice, all municipalities in Ontario so far that have implemented a CPP bylaw have instituted a requirement for notification requirements, essentially that mimics, or as best as possible, current notification requirements. So, for example, when someone submits a site plan application to the town, there's no notification requirement. That's delegated to staff for approval, and it goes forward. Versus if someone proposes a major zoning bylaw amendment akin to a Class 3 application, which would come to council for approval, there are notification requirements there that mimic the same notification requirements that you would require today for a zoning bylaw amendment. The difference is for Class 2 applications, where you might see some level of variation, but minor variation, and that was established through the bylaw. And that was a very important part of our consultation with the community, establishing what threshold is a staff variation versus what is a council variation. That's in your bylaw. We've received lots of comments when we did the first round, Alcona and Our Shore review last year. We refined that again through the housekeeping amendment and this process. So we're fairly comfortable that we've hit a really nice benchmark of that threshold to allow staff and their expertise to make decisions on those more minor applications, where those larger ones will come to council still for approval with, of course, proper notification. So I just wanted to clarify that. I thought that was an important thing to cover off, and to reassure the public that even in any class application, there is the ability to submit comments, whether it's to staff for a staff approval or to staff for consideration by council. I'm just going to skip ahead to maybe, as I did say I was going to be brief. There's exemptions from the bylaw. These are things like if you're building a single detached dwelling, for example, and it complies with all the bylaw requirements, that's not something that would go through site plan approval today. So you don't need a community planning permit for it. You can go right to building permit as long as you comply with all regulations. So you'd be exempt from this bylaw. Mimics the existing process today where you'd be able to go right to a building permit. Or interior renovations, things like that, you don't need a permit. So these are all exemptions that already exist within your bylaw. But I did want to just talk a little bit about the structure of the bylaw. It follows the same structure as the existing CPP bylaw that's in effect, but of course with additional sections because we've added many precincts to cover off the agricultural and rural area, the employment areas, and some other things. So sections 1 through 4, which you see on this screen, they establish the foundation of the bylaw and are very important sections to refer to. They deal with the administrative and interpretation definitions, general provisions, and parking and loading requirements. So these are things that apply townwide. And then 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and I'll just switch to 8 and 9 are employment and countryside, but 5, 6, oops, skipped over the wrong way. 5, 6, 7 are residential, commercial, mixed use, community service, open space, and environmental protection precincts. These set out the precinct-based permissions. So if you're within a residential precinct, and the word precinct, you can trade that with the word zone, just to think of it. That's what precinct means. We're purposely not using the word zone anymore because it's no longer a zoning bylaw. So these set out what's permitted on your property, the development standards that apply, such as front yard setbacks, side yard setbacks, maximum building height. All of these things are largely carried over from your zoning bylaw and implemented into the CPP bylaw. So what's permitted today on a property is still permitted in this CPP bylaw, and the same regulations generally will apply to it. Sections 9 and 10, section 10 carries forward site-specific exceptions. So in your zoning bylaw, you have many properties that have very specific, they've gone through a zoning bylaw amendment, they have specific permissions or regulations that apply to them. We've carried all of these forward so that you don't have leftover pieces that are still relating back to a zoning bylaw that's no longer in effect. And we've updated them to make sure that they refer to the sections, the appropriate sections within the CPP bylaw. Thank you to staff for all that, that work. I'm looking at all of you because literally everyone was involved in that. It's a big process, but we wanted to make sure, of course, that existing land rights are carried forward. This structure, just as a summary, you got your schedules at the end and your appendices. It's meant to be a comprehensive structure, but we've tried to simplify certain things as compared to your zoning bylaw so that it's a little bit easier to navigate. But again, this is the same structure that you already have established within your CPP bylaw. Now I will just go right to the end because this is just going through a little bit what I talked about. You can refer back to this presentation for details of what's within each section. And I will just pause on the maps which are coming up. So what you're seeing here is a town-wide map of all the precincts, and you can see little squares on it, which are key maps, or this is a key map showing where all the individual maps are located. So here's an example of 2 of those maps. So you can get a really nice level of detail on these printed maps that form part of the physical copies or the online PDF of the bylaw, or you can go on the town's website and use the interactive mapper and pan to wherever you'd like. And it is very clear what precinct you fall into. And there's another couple examples. But I just wanted to conclude by saying, again, this is really a tool that we think is going to provide the town with a more consistent, flexible, and transparent way to approach planning. You're already using it, and it's great to see you expanding to the rest of the community. We've received correspondence throughout our dialogue with the community. However, as you can see, even I spoke with many of you at the public open house last week. We haven't received too many comments, and I think that is probably reflective, I hope, of a level of comfort with the CPP bylaw, given that you already have it in your community, and it's translating, the zoning bylaw is translating well into the CPP bylaw. So I hope that is a message for all of you. Those comments that have been received, I will say, we are taking those back and considering addressing those. And as well as some of the matters that personally I had discussions with some of you at the open house. So these are things that we will be considering. So that concludes my presentation. It was and hopefully not too long, but just brief enough. And I just wanted to thank you all.
Thank you very much. It was very informative, and we appreciate it very much, Mr. Riley. So we'll now hear from members of the public who have questions or comments regarding this matter. I'll first call on those in attendance here at Town Hall who wish to provide comments to come forward to the podium, and please state your name and address for the record. It is my understanding that we've had no one register from online earlier, virtually to speak on this item. So anyone interested in making a comment on the CPPS? And I'll ask one more time, is there anyone who would like to make a comment on the community planning permit bylaw? Seeing none, I will now ask clerks if any emails have been received during the meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. There was one additional piece of correspondence received from Corey Chisholm from MHBC Planning, and this will be added to the agenda to form part of the record.
Thank you for that. And I'll now ask council if there are any questions or comments on the CPPS. Deputy Feller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just a point of clarification here moving forward. Under the current standards, we have the Committee of Adjustment when anything is brought up that doesn't meet code with the town, and they're looking for the variations. So that is being removed under the new plan. It is being placed solely in the hands of the staff. Is that my understanding?
GM Correa?
Through Mayor Dolan. So the way the CPPS bylaw works is there would be no committee of adjustment for minor variances, and either it's a Class 2 permit, which is a staff approval, or if they exceed those thresholds, it bumps it up to a council approval.
Follow-up?
Thank you. Okay, so in the presentation, it says a threshold limit. Now, is that written down with hard limitations, numbers, figures, or is it varied from account to account to account?
Through Mayor Dolan to Deputy Mayor Fowler. So each precinct has various requirements, whether it be setbacks, building heights, maximum lot coverage. It's a prescriptive number as to what can be considered Class 2 and dealt with by staff versus what exceeds that and would need to go to council for approval.
Go ahead, Council, Deputy.
Thank you. Okay, so if there's someone who disagrees with the process, is there an appellant process? Are they able to appeal, or is it just written in stone that it can't be adjusted, or if it's a minor enough variation that the person doing the project feels that it doesn't qualify for Class 3, is there a way they can challenge that, or is it just, like, again, firmly?
Manager Correa?
Through Mayor Dolan. So generally, it's only the applicant who would have appeal rights. However, there are notice requirements for a Class 2 permit, similarly for a Class 3 permit. And so we may and often do receive comments from neighboring properties, and staff do take that into consideration as we're doing our technical review through the review of that Class 2 permit.
The question I'm asking is, the comments are brought to staff. If the applicant doesn't agree when the final process goes through, do they have the ability to appeal it, or is it firm? That's what I'm asking.
Brandon, may I speak to that? Yes. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Deputy Mayor. In a community planning permit system, the applicant has the right of appeal. The neighbor who might not agree with a decision does not have the right to appeal, and that is the same that exists today in a community adjustment process and even zoning bylaw amendment applications where there's no third-party appeals. But the applicant does have the right to appeal. If a decision is not made within 45 days, they have the right to appeal, and they have the right to appeal whatever decision is made.
So this would go to the OLT then, at that point?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Waters?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think anything that improves process and efficiency is good. So I think 99.9% of everything I've seen so far, I agree with. So there is just one minor item, which I did bring up to staff, that I'd just like to make sure that that somehow makes it into this bylaw, and that's around the issue of EVs in multi-res. So currently, there is one sentence in the entire bylaw that deals with EVs for condos and things like that, and that's a 1% requirement that the developer has to meet. I had requested that we have at least a 10% EV ready component to it, so it would be nice to see that, and that Newmarket, Whitby, and Kitchener all have EV ready components to their EV bylaw. So I just like to make sure that gets into this bylaw at some point in time, because it is really difficult, it is really expensive to build in that infrastructure afterwards. So if you allow 1% and all of a sudden gas gets really expensive and everyone wants to switch, condo boards will not spend the money unless, a significant number of members are going to have EVs. So I don't think that's going to happen. So if we can build in the expansion route, which is already there through just minor conduits that go in to make the whole process cheaper and easier to do, allows that condo to grow, it would be nice to be able to see that. So I just want to make sure that I said it out loud and that everyone heard me, and would like to see this built into our bylaw. And in fact, it's kind of interesting that both, I think Newmarket and Whitby is 20% EV ready. And so my request of 10% is half that, so hopefully it makes it in, because I'm not being that demanding. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Riley.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Waters. Yes, you were one of the individuals that I was referring to, that I spoke to, that with some suggestions. So with that suggestion, I just wanted to confirm that we hear you, and it's something that we're already looking into.
Thank you.
Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you for the presentation. I definitely agree with Councillor Waters that if there's a way we can make things more efficient and quicker, that definitely the right way to go. And I think this bylaw is headed that way. I guess my problem is around what are the details and how will they apply to each individual situation. So when it comes to the precincts, is there transparent data on what is allowed in each certain precinct? Will there be a place where residents can go to determine, you know, what their projected, what their project, where it fits in the town and whatnot? And how would they be changed if we wanted to do that?
Mr. Riley?
Sure. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Ices. Yes, particularly sections 5 through 9 of the CPP bylaw. So that will tell you, well, first you look at the map and you find out what precinct applies to the property that you're curious about. Then you refer to sections 5 to 9 of the bylaw, and that'll tell you exactly what's permitted, what your minimum lot size requirements are, setbacks, all of that. And more so, it'll even tell you if you're proposing a variation, here's your threshold of what makes that a Class 2 versus a staff approval versus a Class 3 council approval.
That's great. And I guess the challenge for residents is to, you know, if they have a certain number they're looking for, where in the town they might be able to find that. And my second question was, you know, if we find that those rules in the bylaw need to be amended over time, what's the process to do that?
Mr. Riley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Councillor Ices. So with respect to finding the information, I know the town's made the bylaw available online, but I also understand that even the front counter staff know about the CPP bylaw and can actually instruct people and show people, if someone was just walking into town hall, where to find out some information. And then certainly all planning staff have been involved, policy and development planning staff have been involved in the creation of these bylaws, so I have a really good understanding should any phone calls or inquiries come through. And the second question was regarding any changes that might needed to be made. And so this year, actually earlier this year, is a perfect example of that. After the implementation of the Alcona and the Shoreline combined your existing CPP bylaw, staff were keeping logs of, you know, minor things that needed to change. And in March, council approved a housekeeping amendment, which was not appealed as well, to make sure that the bylaw, you know, there was an unintended consequence of this, or we got that number wrong, let's change that. That came forward, it was fixed. And that could certainly happen again, but there is I think your staff here is very cognizant of paying attention to things that might not be working well, like last time, and they kept a list, and that's what made its way into the housekeeping amendment. And I think it was a good thing to bring forward, and we carried all that forward into this bylaw here that you see.
Thank you for that. And my last question is more looking into the future. Expectations a lot of us on council are looking to run again in the next term. How many less meetings will we have on Wednesday nights?
I don't know if we're going to let the consultants answer that question, but it is definitely nice to find some efficiencies, not just for council, but also for staff to have less work on their plate as well. I think that I want to commend staff for moving this direction. We were one of the leaders out of the gate with this new process. Not many had gone before us when we had our first go at the CPPS. And now, Mr. Riley, would you be able to tell us how many out of the 444 municipalities in Ontario, how many currently have a town-wide CPPS?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So town-wide, we can say in terms of new CPPSs that are in effect, there's Huntsville and Lake of Bays, and now town of Innisfil is going to be the next one. And very soon, the city of Peterborough, which is quite a large municipality in terms of an urban area. Oh yeah, County of Brant is also about to be, it's county-wide, so Paris, Ontario is one of the settlement areas there. There are many other municipalities that have piloted this. So Waterloo just recently approved for one of their strategic growth areas a pilot CPPS. It's still in an appeal period, hopefully no appeals. We'll find out June 15th. And we've got, Carleton Place is townwide, Gananoque is townwide. Those are older development permit systems. But in starting this process, we had meetings with all of these municipalities and just hearing the good experiences that they've had for many years, it was very encouraging to hear. And in all the municipalities that we've worked in and we're still working in, developing these CPP bylaws, we're having some great conversations with everyone, and your staff here are even receiving phone calls from many of these other municipalities asking for their experience, about their experience. And an example was with Fort Erie, where Brandon and Kirsten joined us on a call to convince them this is the right thing, let's go. So anyways, it's good.
That is great to hear, because I've certainly heard from many of my colleagues and asking questions about it as well. So that's wonderful. Anytime we can make things more efficient, saves everybody time and money. That's a good thing. But also really important to me is consistency. A bit of a fun fact from the history: after amalgamation, if you came to the town of Innisfil, there was 5 zoning booklets to deal with. There was a piece of West Gwillimbury, there was the old township of Innisfil, there was the village of Cookstown, there was the township of Essa, and one more, I can't remember. And so it was really hard to explain to a resident why you could do this in this piece of the town of Innisfil, but you couldn't do it in this piece of the town of Innisfil. So that consistency, I think, speaks a lot. For efficiency and cutting red tape, but also for credibility of the organization. So thank you so much for that. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Seeing none, where were we? I want to thank you to all who participated in the public meeting with respect to proposed application, and those who came out to the public meeting too that we had on June the 2nd. Thank you for your interest in that and for showing an interest in this matter. And can I now have a mover and a seconder to receive the comments provided this evening? Moved by Councillor Waters, seconded by Councillor Zanella. All those in favor? That is carried. Council thanks everyone for their participation on it, and we'll move forward with our planning public meeting item number 2. So tonight's second item concerns a proposed zoning bylaw amendment application for 1417 6th Line in the town of Innisfil. We'll start by hearing from town staff regarding the application. We'll then have an opportunity for the public to make an oral submission in person or virtually. All speakers will have 5 minutes to ask their questions and express their concerns, and staff will respond where possible. We'll then, after everyone's had an opportunity, if you have more you'd like to say or request clarification, you'll be given additional time. After hearing from members of the public, council will have an opportunity to ask any questions or provide comments. Should any member of the public watching the live stream wish to comment, they can email Clerk's Services, and these comments will be provided to council and town staff and taken into consideration before council makes a final decision. You may also be added to the circulation list as an interested party and will be updated on any future information regarding this item. I will tell everybody here, depending on the number of comments received, this is an item that we will be considering this evening if we don't receive many comments. So we'll now hear from Town Clerk Jennifer Marshall about how public notice of this meeting was provided.
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice for this public meeting was provided to the required agencies, and the notice was circulated to all landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands on May 21st, 2026, in accordance with the Planning Act. Corresponding signage was posted on the property on May 21st, 2026. Information and materials respecting the application were posted on the town's Get Involved page.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Have you received any correspondence concerning the proposed application?
Thank you, Your Worship. No pieces of correspondence have been received by the clerk's office regarding this application. Members of the public may provide comments during this meeting by contacting the clerk's office at clerksoffice@innisfil.ca.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Savannah Hassan, Development Planner for the Town of Innisfil, who will provide a summary of the planning context of the application.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, staff, and members of the public here tonight. The purpose of this presentation is to consider the proposed temporary use bylaw to permit the existing Orbit Sales Pavilion for a 3-year term. The purpose of this application is to rezone the subject lands from the agricultural general zone to a new site-specific agricultural general exception 36 zone to permit the existing Orbit Sales Pavilion as a temporary use for 3 years until 2029. The intent of this application was to extend the original expiration date in temporary use bylaw number 04423, which was adopted on April 26, 2023, originally permitting the temporary sales pavilion on the subject property until April 26, 2026. Since standalone sales pavilions are not permitted as of right in any zone, a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment was required in order for the sales pavilion use to be permitted, and it can only be extended for a maximum of 3 years at the discretion of council. A 3-year extension to the original temporary use bylaw could not be made because of the expiration date having passed before this application could be heard at council. So that's why there's a new application and file number which was required to facilitate the temporary use until 2029, even though there are no proposed changes to the plans that were approved previously for this site. The subject lands containing the pavilion are located outside of a settlement area in an agricultural area with frontage on 6th Line and 20th Side Road, having a lot area of approximately 397,000 meters squared. The existing sales pavilion and associated parking covers approximately 8,600 meters squared, and it's situated at the northwest corner of the lot near the intersection of 6th Line and 20th Side Road, which is shown more closely on the next slide. Here's an image showing the portion of the subject land that the pavilion is situated on. It has been constructed and it obtained occupancy in early April of this year. The proposal has been reviewed by town staff for consistency and conformity with provincial, county, and town policies, which include the provincial planning statement, Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, Simcoe County Official Plan, Innisfil Official Plan, and the town zoning bylaw. And these are all listed on the staff report in tonight's agenda with some more details. We have not received any correspondence from agencies or the public regarding this application to date. In summary, the application proposes to establish a site-specific zoning provision to permit the existing temporary Orbit Sales Pavilion located at 1417 6th Line, as approved in 2023, to continue as a temporary use for 3 years until 2029. In terms of next steps, staff are recommending that the proposed temporary use bylaw be considered by council for adoption immediately following the public meeting, provided that any comments received tonight can be addressed at this meeting. If there are comments received tonight that require further review, then staff will recommend that the proposed bylaw amendment be considered at a future council meeting. And finally, a notice of council's decision on the matter will be provided to anyone who requested notification or who submitted written correspondence. That concludes my presentation. Questions or comments can be submitted to me by email or on Get Involved using this QR code. And we also have staff here to answer any questions today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hassan. We'll now hear from members of the public who have questions or comments regarding this matter. I'll first call those in attendance here at Town Hall who wish to provide comments to come forward to the podium, and please state your name and address for the record. And it's my understanding we've had no one has come forward virtually and asked to speak. So anyone here who would like to speak on this item, please come forward.
Hello, I'm Kelly Lester. Thanks for letting me speak.
We need your address too, please.
44 King Street North in Cookstown.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Regarding this 3-year extension, Council is once again being asked to hand over long-term oversight entirely to municipal staff. My concern is that Council is trusting staff with multi-year extensions and town-wide permit systems, yet staff-level digital security is fundamentally vulnerable, as proven by the town's recent phishing breach. On June 2nd, I asked the Planning Department critical questions about data sovereignty and the lack of AI bills of materials for the Smart City tracking packages being baked into our infrastructure. Staff could not answer, and the Engineering Department has completely ignored my follow-up email. If our administration cannot secure a basic email network from a phishing scam, and if they refuse to be transparent with citizens asking about technology on our streets, Council cannot keep granting multi-year extensions and rubber stamping staff control behind closed doors. I request that my ignored technical questions be officially appended to tonight's record. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lister. Are there any other comments or questions of clarity regarding this item? I'll ask once again, anyone else who wants to speak regarding the extension of the sales pavilion? Seeing none, I'll now ask the clerk if any emails have been received during the meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. No emails have been received.
Now I will ask council if there's any questions or comments on this item. Seeing none, thank you to all those who participated in the public meeting with respect to the proposed application and for showing an interest in the matter. We'll now go to the recommendation to consider the application. Can I have a mover and a seconder to consider extending this application? Moved by Councillor Zanella, seconded by Councillor Waters. All those in favor? That is carried. Council thanks everyone for their participation. We will now go to the confirming bylaw and adjournment of the Special Council Public Planning meeting. Can I please have a mover and a seconder to do that? Moved by Deputy Fowler, seconded by Councillor Ices. All those in favor? That is carried. We will now reconvene our Special Council meeting. Thank you. Do we need a motion to reconvene, Madam Clerk? Thank you. So mover and a seconder to reconvene at 7:18 p.m. Moved by Councillor Drodge, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? That is carried. And I believe we were on item, before we were so rudely interrupted by the public planning meeting, on delegations. And Nick McDonald from Meridia Planning Consultants is our next delegation this evening. Welcome.
Yes,
whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. My name is Nick McDonald. I'm a registered professional planner and also the president of Meridian Planning Consultants. And I'm here this evening to provide a brief presentation to you and make a request on behalf of Rice Development regarding a property in Stroud at 8010 Yonge Street. Next slide, please. So our request is essentially that the policies of the downtown commercial area designation in Stroud in your official plan be amended to specifically permit townhouses in addition to apartments on lands owned by Rice Development in Stroud. The property in question is shown on this slide. It is to the west of Yonge Street, south of Lynn Street. There is a Tim Hortons on the property. And the property itself is used basically for a septic system tile field for the plaza to the north of Lynn Street that is also owned by Rice Development and for the Tim Hortons. The site itself has an area of about 1.9 hectares and has been owned by Rice Development for many years. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with Rice Development. They've owned multiple properties in the town and that were the original developers of the Sandy Cove Acres, for which I've provided lots of advice over the years as well. Since services are expected to be provided to Stroud in 2028, 2029, the time has come for sure to consider the intensification of these lands. Next slide. So our proposal at this point is to develop 126 apartment units in 2 4-story buildings on the site, on the east side of the site. 64 one-bedroom, 38 two-bedroom, and 24 three-bedroom. Underground parking would also be provided. We're also proposing to develop 28 townhouses in 4 buildings with 7 units each. On the west side, the buildings will be 3 stories tall. The total number of units proposed is 154. That translates into about 81 units per hectare with an FSI of about 1.04. A parkette is also proposed on the north side of the property to the west of the Tim Hortons, and that would translate into about 9% of the area of the property. It can be public or private, and we're open to either consideration. Private roads are proposed with 2 entrances, one to Lynn Street on the north and the other to Yonge Street on the east. A number of supporting studies have been completed, and we are proposing to submit applications in the next 2 months. In terms of the number of townhouses proposed on the site, about 18% of the units proposed will be townhouses. Next slide. So the reason why we're here today is because we're talking about what is an appropriate transition on this site, but even generally across the board. It is very, very customary along urbanizing corridors like Yonge Street for there to be transitions in built form between taller buildings that are closer to the street and low-density neighborhoods. These transitions allow for new development to fit in better with existing development, and it reduces land use conflicts that can arise from overlook, shadowing, noise, and visual impact. And there are hundreds of examples where this has been required and developed. So the graphic on the bottom is essentially the site. On the left-hand side, you'll see the proposed apartment building with the underground parking. To the right of that, you'll see the townhouses, and then to the right of that, you'll see the single detached dwellings that front on Small Street to the west. Next slide. So in terms of the policy framework, as I mentioned at the outset, the policies of the downtown commercial area designation, which apply to this site and many other sites in Stroud and across the town, only permit apartments and standalone or mixed-use buildings, in addition, of course, to a range of downtown-type uses. And in my opinion, this does not permit an appropriate transition in built form, and neither does it support the development of housing options. In addition to being within a downtown commercial area, it is also within a strategic growth area as per your official plan, and there are 3 policies on this slide that I think are relevant. The first indicates that strategic growth areas will accommodate significant growth, including a range of mix of housing options, which we're proposing. The second one deals with intensification and infill, and basically requires that an assessment of the ability of the development to fit in and be compatible with existing buildings, lot patterns, and streetscapes be a consideration. And then lastly, there is a policy that applies to circumstances where a strategic growth area is next to an existing residential neighborhood, And in this regard, it talks about providing a transition of height and density through setbacks and the stepping down of buildings towards these neighborhoods. Next slide. So in terms of the justification for the request, I should point out we're not looking for any whole-scale changes to the official plan. We're not looking for the policies of the general commercial area designation, or sorry, the downtown commercial area designation to be changed across the board to permit townhouses. It may actually be quite appropriate to do so in some circumstances, but not all, and we're not asking for that. The subject lands are, in my view, ideally suited for intensification. The town has agreed. The lands are identified as a strategic growth area, and this is where development is to be directed. In my view, permitting only one housing type in these areas without considering other housing types limits the number of housing options that may be available. And of course, we've all heard over and over again that we're supposed to do more with less and provide more in terms of options. And in this case, the lands are being reserved for apartment building uses predominantly on the east side in terms of the number of units that are proposed, which is still to the rear of existing development. There's still another row of development between the apartment building and Yonge Street on lands we don't own. And the use of townhouses as a transition tool on this property in intensification areas is very common. It is noted that these lands are considered to be a greenfield site, which is another official plan term, and there is a specific policy that deals with greenfields, which was also applied to the Brookfield site to the south. And the official plan basically states that council shall require the development industry to provide a mix of housing options in each greenfield application, including a mix of dwelling unit types, density, tenure, unit size, and price, including a range of different types of units. And lastly, we've been working with the town over the last year on perfecting an application, and even the town staff in their pre-consultation comments back to the developer directed the developer to consider transitional elements in the form of lower density unit types and lower heights on the subject property to minimize the impacts of developing higher density uses on the site. So we're here tonight to basically ask for an exception to the policies as they apply to these lands. It saves the submitting of an additional application. We do have to submit an application to rezone, but the province has been making it quite clear that if there are opportunities to minimize the number of applications, minimize the expense to the landowner in submitting applications and minimizing the time it takes to get things approved, then those should be explored. So we're asking tonight for council to consider and direct staff to consider this further, and we would be happy to sit down with staff to work out an appropriate wording that would provide Rice Development with the ability to develop townhouses on this site while still getting the apartments that the town so desperately needs to provide a range of housing options to its residents. So that's it for my deputation. I'm certainly happy to take any questions or wait until the appropriate time to do so. And thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Now would be the appropriate time for questions of members of council, should they have any. And I just want to start off by saying nobody knows more about doing more with less than municipalities do. Questions or comments? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the presentation. My first question is around the existing septic system. I assume there's going to be a transition in terms of connecting them all up to the main sewer lines. My question is circulates around reclamation or rehabilitation of that site. What type of rehabilitation are you going to be taking? Because if it's been used as a septic field, there could be some bacterial, long-lived dangers in that soil. So I'm just kind of curious what you're going to do with that.
It's a great question. Certainly, I won't be doing anything with it personally, but I'm certainly aware of there being a process of ensuring that everything related to that septic system, including any soils that may have been affected by the use of that septic system, would be removed from the site. And there would be a requirement to demonstrate that the site is clean for the purposes of its redevelopment going forward.
Go ahead, Councillor Waters.
Thank you very much. My only other point is I think your height is reasonable and works within the that development. So it's nice to see reasonable heights in our developments coming forward. It's not a 20-story. It's something that I think would fit right in, and is a perfect example of transitional housing and development. So thank you very much in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Feller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a few concerns. A communal septic system of that size, I think, is something that, if something goes wrong, it is in a very, it's a very large epicenter of the community. Also, on your slides, I'm curious, in the transition in built form, you have the width, the distance, the setbacks, but you have no heights. You have nothing listed here under the heights, and just from a glance here, it looks like the 3-story townhomes are the same height as the 4-story apartments. So that makes me question, like, what are we looking at here in regards to this? Because we're not given full information. There's things that are missing that need to be put in if this is to be added at all.
I'm going to let you go ahead, Mr. McDonough, but I'm just going to start by saying this is requesting an amendment to the OP policy. This is not a planning application or a zoning bylaw amendment. Mr. McDonald.
Yeah, it's a fair question. I'm looking at the graphic myself. It all comes down to the number of stories and the number of balconies and the number of windows that may be on those stories that are often of concern to folks that live in established neighborhoods. So I'm thinking more of this in terms of the number of stories that are proposed. The 4 stories that we're proposing in the apartment building is the maximum permitted in Stroud by your official plan policies, even though 8 stories would be permitted in a similar designation in Alcona. And the 3-story townhouse form, again, this is really just a graphic to demonstrate how height is usually transitioned from higher density to lower densities. And as the mayor indicated, we are really just looking to get the permission in the policy framework and continue our conversations with the town to ensure that that transition works on this site. There may be another form of townhouse development that works much better than the one we're proposing, but we want to have the ability to have that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. Can you also just cover that this is to happen on full services and not a communal septic system?
Oh, for sure. Yes, thank you for that, Madam Mayor. For sure, we're talking about this being a fully serviced development, and there are plans, of course, as you all know, for services to be extended to Stroud. Rice Development's very excited about that and is looking forward to working with the town on that. So we are not talking communal services. We're not talking private services. We're talking about full municipal services as there are in Alcona.
Deputy Fowler, follow up?
Just a point of clarification. The reason I'm asking these questions, it's always better to ask when pen is put to paper as opposed to shovel in the ground. So it's better that we have this information long beforehand and have an understanding of what is being proposed, even in a broad sense of the terms. Thank you.
Councillor Drudge.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to follow up on wastewater, I guess you'd be decommissioning that communal septic system anyway, because those are the lands you want to build on. So all the commercial would be hooked up to wastewater as well, correct?
That is absolutely correct, yes.
Other questions or comments for Mr. McDonald? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll have a recommendation. A mover and a seconder, please, to receive the delegation as information. Moved by Councillor Zanella, seconded by Councillor Constantine. All those in favor? That is carried. Next is item 5.3, and Mr. Tung from KLM Planning regarding the Mutso Group of properties.
Hi, good evening, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Billy Tum. I'm a registered professional planner and a partner at KLM Planning Partners. We represent the Mutso Group of companies operating as 1720121 Ontario Limited with respect to their lands at 3425 6th Line. As you may recall, I appeared before you back in January with the last draft of the OP, and at that point I had highlighted that the subject lands where they are in location to the existing Innisfil Heights employment area directly to the south of it, south of a filed draft plan of subdivision immediately on the north side of 6th Line, and in the future planned interchange where lands have already been starting to get acquired for that interchange at 6th Line with Highway 400. At that time, I had brought to everyone's attention that our clients' lands were already identified as future strategic settlement employment area back in 2020 through OPA 2. So, we are pleased that at least there's a recognition in the most current draft that that's been rectified, but obviously our client's request was to add the lands into the employment boundary today, given that they had been identified as a future strategic employment area back in 2020 and had waited since then for this OP review, for this opportunity to be added into the employment area. So again, just to reiterate the requests, given the contextual configuration of these lands immediately abutting the existing employment lands, given that there is a planned interchange at 6th Line at this critical location, and the planned infrastructure that are going in through the plan of subdivision to the north, it makes sense to bring these lands that were already previously identified in 2020 into the employment area now, so that these pieces of infrastructure are recognized and better utilized. I just want to point out one matter in terms of servicing. There is a planned pumping station, the red dot, that's just above the subject lands that an EA has yet to be completed, but it just makes sense now that if these lands are identified and contained in the employment areas now, there are greater efficiencies in that planned pumping station so that the lands could be accounted for now instead of waiting till the next OP review, next planning horizon, and then the pumping station, all of this would have been completed, and then we would have to redo everything all over again with costly upgrades and costly infrastructure when this could be handled now through this OP review, accounted for, and the EA for the pumping stations could account for these lands today. So with that, I do want to just close with the fact that obviously through COPA 7, the town of Innisfil was identified to take on some significant employment growth of around 20,000 additional jobs. And this request, I think it makes sense from a planning perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, that it be included now while this is this urban structure is being examined now, included, so that, again, there's efficiencies in all of the planned infrastructure that's happening to support not only these lands, but the existing employment lands that have yet to develop. I'm available for any questions, should there be any. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions on this piece of land? Seeing none, thank you so much for the presentation, and we will move to the recommendation that the presentation by Mr. Tung be received. All those, mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Eisses. All those in favor? That is carried. Is that the end of the delegations, Madam Clerk? It is. Okay, so now we'll go on to our business items. So we're on item 6. I'm just looking to council members. Do we need 5 minutes? Well, why don't we wait before we go into closed session? So we'll deal with this item first. So this is item 6.1, and I'm going to, first of all, turn it over to CEO Gershaw just to provide a few comments regarding this latest development on development charges.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I'll just maybe echo some of the points that are in the staff report we provided. Apologies to council for providing it only yesterday. This has been a kind of late-breaking item that we've been looking into over the past 10 days or so. I think it's fair to say that the question of development charges has been under much discussion in Ontario over the past couple of years, especially as the housing market has slowed down, as concerns have been raised about housing affordability. It's kind of called into question, whether development charges are contributing to, inaccessibility to the housing market and causing housing projects not to move forward. So clearly, the provincial government has taken a strong interest in that issue and has been encouraging municipalities to voluntarily reduce their development charges. There are some municipalities around Ontario who have done so. I think what we're seeing now with this new program is a kind of a next step in that effort by the province, where now in conjunction with the federal government as well, who also has an interest in the housing issues, they're adding essentially incentives for municipalities to consider reducing their development charges on a voluntary basis. So as you can see in the report, the basic idea here is that you can choose to participate in this program or not. So that's kind of the first question. And then if you choose to participate, it's saying you have to reduce your development charges by at least 30%. There's a number of details in the program guidelines about that, but in exchange, you have the opportunity to potentially benefit from federal and provincial infrastructure funding. And so this follows from the announcement that the Prime Minister and Premier Ford made at the end of March as part of a wider effort to invest $8.8 billion in housing enabling infrastructure. So this is the vehicle for that funding to flow. So there are a number of considerations around this. It is very hard to forecast how much development charge revenue we might give up if we participated. It's also hard to know, essentially impossible to know right now, how much grant funding we might get on the other side of the equation. The guidelines do say up to 90%, and that sounds like a lot of money, but I think it's also been made pretty clear that 90% will only be granted to municipalities who go well beyond the minimum 30% reduction threshold. But how exactly that math works, we don't really know at this point in time. So, this is pretty hot off the presses. The program was only really announced in its details on June the 1st. We've worked very quickly and diligently, both with town staff and in-services staff, to assess these program guidelines, to assess how we might participate. I will say last week we had a meeting of our developer liaison group, and this was a hot topic of discussion there. We've received correspondence on this issue from the development sector as well. So I think a lot of folks in that world want to see the town participate in this program. And, I think for council, the key question is first, again, if you think of it in that two-step way, just at a policy level, do you want to kind of play ball as a part of this program? And then beyond that, we need to get more specific about how deep a reduction to offer and what projects to propose for funding, because the program also says there's certain types of projects that are more preferred for funding. Housing enablement is a key criterion under the program. And so just because of the very, very tight timelines here, applications have to be submitted by June 19th. The expectation has clearly been set that transfer payment agreements, this is all supposed to be wrapped up by the middle of August. We are asking for some delegation of council's authority to staff to make those final decisions. If council directs that we should apply, to leave it to staff to figure out the best projects to apply with. We do have a mid-August council meeting, so if we get to that stage, and there could still be an opportunity to bring this back to council for further discussion then. But basically, we are asking for some degree of delegation to staff to allow us to move this forward if council chooses to participate. So I'll stop there and welcome any questions.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gershow. It has been, unbelievably quick to go from learning about this to having to have the submissions made by June the 19th, which is, it's a very difficult process. So I thank you and staff for jumping on that right away. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Deputy Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. In theory, I like the idea. We reduce costs, the federal government, the provincial government gives us money in return. It balances out on the sheet to a degree. However, once rubber hits the road, there's no guarantee that any project we put forward that we reduce the DC charges on will result in a lower cost from the contractor or the developer who we give it to. So we're playing it's a little bit of carrot, a little bit of stick here, right? And I'm comfortable to a degree, but I mean, in the end, when it comes down to it, if we have a shortfall in DC charges, that comes on the shoulders of the taxpayer, and that's not something I want to know more information. And when they put it out and said, well, you got 9 more days, there you go, have fun. I'm sorry, it makes me hesitant moving forward with this. So if we can get an understanding from staff, like just a general idea, even are we looking at the 30%? Are we looking at more? Is there any specific projects that would benefit from this theoretically and potentially?
CEO Gershow.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. So yes, fair point. To the extent that we will not receive DC revenues we had been planning to, that money will have to come from somewhere else. That could be grant funding through the program, but because we don't know how much that is going to be, it would have to then come from other sources, either reserves we currently hold, or the taxpayer, essentially, or the ratepayer. And I say ratepayer in particular because as we've been assessing the projects to date, our general feeling has been that water wastewater projects are likely the best fit for a few different reasons. They're relatively large. They are very growth oriented. They're very much in that housing enabling category. So it's the kind of project we believe the senior governments are looking for. And they're relatively ready to go into construction because of the work that's already been done through things like the Master Servicing Plan and so on. So for example, the program requires projects to be into construction, I think is by 2030 and finished by 2035. So that's kind of how we're leaning. What the challenge is determining on the DC reduction side where those reductions would be made, because they're looking for 30% as a minimum in aggregate. But remember, we charge DCs across a variety of different service categories: water collection, water treatment, roads and related, other types of community services. And you can actually make the reductions more in some categories than in others, as long as you get to a total of 30% at the end of the day. So to your question about how much reduction are we looking at, I draw council's attention to recommendation number 3 to authorize application of up to a 50% reduction, which is meant to give us, a couple things to be competitive under the program, in the sense that if you're going in at the absolute minimum, you may not benefit as much from the grant funding, but also just to see how the exact math works out, balancing projects versus reductions to see exactly where we end up. I guess maybe I failed to speak to the most important question, which is that item number 2 is recommending an application. I think you've heard me speak to council in the past about the importance of development charges as a revenue source for infrastructure. That is absolutely true. And only last week, we were talking about the long-range financial plan and the significant pressures that we face as a community when it comes to building out infrastructure, and the same applies for in-services. I guess the thinking here is that if council ever wanted to contemplate DC reductions, this is probably the best way to go at it, where we do have the opportunity to benefit from a grant funding program rather than just making the reductions in isolation. So, philosophically, do we need DC revenue for our infrastructure? Yes. But in the environment that we're in, and given some of the town's own policy commitments to trying to get housing built, if you're willing to take the DC reduction tool out of the toolbox, we're basically saying now's the time to use it if you want to use that tool. And so hence the recommendation to authorize an application.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I'll go to Councillor Waters, then Councillor Zanella.
Thank you, Worship. We've always told residents that development pays for development. It costs money to move these services to complete whole communities. So that developer, those residents should be paying for, and that's the cost of building that house. That's what we've always told. And it's been relatively equal. It has worked out that way. Now we're asking for the residents of the existing town to pick up the slack. And it seems that the provincial and the federal governments are throwing everything. We're selling the farm to try to get development to build houses. But my opinion, and this is just my opinion, that housing is not going to move until things improve South Perth. People do not want to buy houses when their jobs are insecure and everything else. So I don't think we're going to throw all this, and there's going to be. I don't think there's going to be any movement for at least another 4 to 5 years until things change down south of the border, and there's a more positive atmosphere towards people feeling comfortable that the economy is good. Plus, we also have a war going on in the Middle East. The other piece, and I'm glad you alluded to it, was the fact that we just had a Henson report that stated that, the town is financially sound right now, but in 3 to 5 to 10 years, we're going to run into some serious capital reserve issues. And we talked about that if we did nothing, it was going to cost us about a 7% increase in taxes for the residents of Innisfil. If we or some mitigation strategies, it would be 5%. So common sense says we're going to try mitigation and we're going to go down to 5%. Now we're going to say, well, hey, we're going to reduce taxes, DCs by 50%, 100%, and we're only going to maybe get, at the best case scenario, we're going to get 90% back. So that means we're not going to be whole, and that we're going to be going back to residents. And so we're going to have to go back to residents and say, it's really the feds and provincial's fault that we're in this situation, that we're now going to have to be charging you 8 and 9% increases in your taxi because we bought into this, this scheme around, trying to get development going. So, I can't imagine, considering what we know from the Henson report and asking us to make a decision now that we're going to put the existing taxpayer on the hook for that deficit that we're going to run. This is not going to make us whole. If they wanted this to really be an incentive, this is not an incentive. This is us paying to have development come. And I don't know how you address this that makes me happy about it, but it's certainly not going to be a story that I'm going to be happy in 5 years' time telling residents, sorry, your taxes are going up by 9 and 10% because we wanted to encourage development 5 years ago. So I think it's just I think it's a bad deal all around, and I don't want to put our residents at risk of those types of increases when we already know there's going to be an issue in that timeline. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zanella.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm thinking along the same lines, and I'm thinking, what happens if we did decide to do that, and then the provincial government changes their mind, or something else comes up? I mean, they promised us a GO station. There's no GO station. So I keep thinking, they've done it to us before, so I'm not so sure that anything would change much this time. Thank you.
Councillor Drodge.
Thanks, Your Worship. I couldn't agree with Councillor Waters anymore, and that doesn't happen very often. But if the DC charges, if we reduced our DC charges, and I genuinely thought that the person buying that house was going to get the savings, maybe I'd entertain it. But I just don't see it that way. It's a ploy to try to build more homes. The people buying those homes are still going to pay whatever market value is. I think lowering the DC charges for the developer is not going to lower the cost of the home. We're forgetting about two big things here, attainable housing and affordable housing. They could be DC exempt anyway if they fall under those jurisdictions. The province has talked about those types of things. So there's some projects that might be DC exempt already and we have no say. Today we have a say, and my say is we keep our DC charges completely intact. Thank you.
Councillor Ices?
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a few words in point 3 that give me a little bit of hope just to maybe look at this a different way than some of my other fellow councillors. It says for the 3-year period that is required under there. As we know right now, there's very little development happening. So if we're giving up 50% of nothing, it's still nothing. So we're not getting development charges anyway. Are we able to, after the 3 years, go back to where we are now or where we're projected to be when it comes to DC charges?
CEO Jershell?
Thank you for the question. I guess, if we go back to the fundamental basics of development charges, they are optional for any municipality in Ontario. There's no obligation to charge them. More than 200 municipalities, though, have chosen to use them as a financing tool. So within the current legislative framework, there's a choice to be made about whether to use that tool or not. And then, as council has seen, if you say, okay, we're going to levy development charges, there's a fairly elaborate process to figure out, what are the costs you're trying to recover, and then what rates do you need to charge to get there. I think to the point of what will the province do in the future, it's impossible to say. But if we look over the past few years, I think what we've seen, province has used multiple of its own tools. And remember, with Bill 23, they were trying to legislate DC reductions, and there was kind of a significant backlash to that initiative, and the province kind of backed off. So they've left it for now more in the category of leaving it up to municipalities to just choose to make reductions. Some have, many have not. I see this as now the next step by the province to say, well, we want to see more people more municipalities reducing their DCs. We hope this program will incent them to do so. It's entirely possible that they're not satisfied by the number of municipalities that choose to participate. And they will then say, well, you know what, we're just going to legislate it anyway. And so in terms of what happens 3 years from now, based on what we know today, the program is set up to require that time-limited reduction, 3 years. So the implication is that, at the end of the 3 years, DCs could go back up to what they are now. One could expect that the development sector, once they've gone down, would prefer they stay down. And to the question of will it actually work, that's been an interesting debate, even amongst staff in preparing this report. Because I think you're right, Councillor Ices, the housing market is extremely slow right now. So we are not collecting DC revenue now. And from that perspective, if you believe DCs will, lower DCs will incent more housing construction, and we start seeing more houses get built, then that DC revenue will actually start to go up. So in that sense, that could be beneficial to the town and our bottom line. I think if you look at the other frame of reference would be, well, if in a typical year you expected 500 homes to get built, and at our current rates they would have raised, X million dollars, with the reduction you'd be looking at X minus at least 30%. And in that sense, you would be short. So it kind of depends how you look at it. But the program requires a 3-year reduction. What happens at the end? We currently believe the ball comes back into council's court to decide what to do with DCs. Whether the province takes further action in the next 3 years to require lower DCs, we don't know.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to jump in here first since everyone's had an opportunity, and then I'll go around for second rounds if that's okay. So I'm going to mimic a lot of what was said at the County of Simcoe yesterday. What I said at the County of Simcoe yesterday, the county did pass. They are passing a similar recommendation. They are looking at their largest DCs, which are roads and related. We're certainly the benefactor right now of much of the infrastructure improvements being done in Innisfil, both on County Road 4 and County Road 21. That's all DC monies coming into Innisfil. But I want to look at it the other way. Instead of, as Councillor Waters said, he thinks that things aren't going to come back for 4 years. So that means 3 years of lower DCs is not as significant as it would be if it was we're in a high growth period. But I think the biggest question for me is, what if we pick up our marbles and don't play and go home? So this is, in my opinion, a divide and conquer program. And it's not just this government. Every government's played this game. There'll be municipalities that jump right on board, and they'll be the shiny, good kids, right example. When we go to AMO this year and say, where's our hospital funding? Did Innisfil apply? Oh no, Innisfil said no. So will Innisfil then be at the top of the list for any funding opportunities with the province? I'm not saying that we should, throw the baby out with the bathwater here. What I'm saying is, I think we should apply and say, because there's a very good chance that much of this will be eaten up by the 26 biggest municipalities and the 8 regions in the province who could spend $8 million in 6 months, $8 billion. But so the province could say no. Or if the province comes back and says, well, yes, Innisfil, you can, here's the deal. We still have the opportunity at that point, and I'm going to ask Mr. Gershow to speak to this, to say, you know what, we applied, you gave us some money, but when we do the math, it still doesn't work out very well in our favor. Again, that's going to not make the province happy, but we still have that sober second thought when we see what the final numbers are to make a more solid decision. I think it was the deputy who said, I need more information. How is this all going to work out? And the hard reality is, Councillor Waters, growth hasn't paid for growth in a long, long time. Ever since they changed the Development Charges Act to not allow soft services to be part, to only have 90% of hard services instead of, so we've had this for a very long time, but we do need development charges to provide complete communities. But Mr. Gershow, could you just respond to my comments, and I'm happy to be challenged on them, about whether or not we would have the opportunity to opt out if the deal didn't look good for us when the province came back?
Thank you for the question. That's something that staff have been looking at pretty closely as well. Attached to the staff report are both the program guidelines and a template application form. And at the end of the application form are about 3 pages of terms and conditions that you're being asked to accept simply by making the application. And as someone who used to run infrastructure funding programs in my former life, I can tell you the wording is relatively strong. It's a little unusual. The kinds of things that we're being asked to commit to at the application stage. So I say that just so council's clear that an expectation is being set that if you apply, you're going to follow through. Is that actually legally binding? The analysis we've received so far is that no, it isn't. And even the program guidelines we have available to us now say that it's at the time a transfer payment agreement is signed that everything really kind of kicks in and gets real. So Mayor Dolan, to your question, I do believe it is possible for the town to make its final decision about participation this summer once our application has been assessed and once we have a better sense of if we're getting any project funding, and if so, how much and on what terms. And that's basically the reason why recommendation 4 is written the way it is, so that there is some of that flexibility later in the process to really see, does it make sense to see it through? And this is why I mentioned our August 12th council meeting. You know, I would love to have council's support for that decision. If the timing works out and we can have that conversation on August 12th, I would love to bring this back to council. The way it's written now is just to bake in a bit of contingency flexibility.
Thank you. Okay, second round. Oh, sorry, Councillor Richardson.
Just a quick question, just wondering if there's anything written in there if the government changes, if we change the leader, like what happened then?
CO Gershow.
I think the program's the program. And, you know, the provincial government is very much in the beginning part of their mandate. They've got runway till 2030. So I would not expect a change in the foreseeable future.
Councillor Drotch.
Thanks, Your Worship. So any existing applications, approved applications, would they be able to submit for DC charge exemptions?
So I think the way we understand the program guidelines is that if you participate and implement the reduction's retroactive to March 30th, 2026. So applications that have been dealt with prior to that date, you know, would not be affected. I think especially since we're talking about residential development charges, there have been very, very few since March 30th that have had to pay DCs. So there would be potentially a small refund, but it would be kind of a go-forward thing.
Thanks for that. And just one other question. Would this apply to like an individual, like a contractor building a new home? Would we give that DC exemption to them, or is this for developers only?
The exemption is framed as a residential exemption, or sorry, reduction. So it would apply to really any project, large or small, if it were residential.
Thank you.
Councillor Constantine.
In my opinion, I think we should apply because you will not know the pros and cons unless the application is we apply to the program. We wouldn't want to be left behind. So I think we should send in an application.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to put this in a bit of a nutshell. It's one question that's really going to dictate which way I go with this. So in this hypothetical situation, if we apply and if it's approved and if the DC charges are reduced and if the DC charge reduction is passed on in the savings by the contractor or the developer, and then if the government chooses to give us the money, right, going forward, everything looks good. But in the opportunity that if it doesn't look good for us, it doesn't pan out, it doesn't show any potential, with all those ifs in place, we have that back door. We have that ability to cut the cord and say, we played ball, it's not gonna work, we're not gonna do this to our residents, we have that ability to take a step back and say, look, we tried, but it's not gonna work. I need the reassurance that we have that ability, because otherwise it's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts included in this.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. I think we believe that currently, yes, we would have the opportunity to make that future decision to either participate or not once we've heard back. Just want council to be clear that, based on that application information, there could be further pressure to apply. There's a reference to be made ineligible for future funding programs. So there's a bit of a, pressure being exerted to follow through on any commitment made up front.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to respond to Councillor Icey's comment that, if development doesn't go ahead, we're not going to lose anything. The point of the program is to encourage development. And, we wish that would happen, but as I said earlier, I'm not too sure that's the case. If we said no to this and the provincial government decided that they would take a more heavy-handed approach in terms of legislating us, I would love it. Just because it would be an opportunity for us to say, this is where the pressure is coming from. It's not your local municipality is making this decision. This is a provincial one. And if Mr. Ford wants to go into the next election with increasing taxes through municipalities, I think he would live to regret it. So I don't think they would use that heavy-handed approach with us. Last but not least is that they have just given an HST exemption, which is huge. I mean, you see all the advertising from developers saying, get your HST exemption, and it's still not working. So I think we're basically, like I said earlier, sorry, Kevin, selling the farm to placate the fact that houses aren't being built. I don't think they're going to be built for, like I said, another 4 to 5 years because of the economic situation that everyone's in. There is a slew of resales in Innisfil. If you look at the real estate app, there are literally hundreds of houses. Houses have dropped to at least $200,000. Most houses at one time were over $1 million. Now most of them are under $1 million. So people who are selling their houses can't even get rid of them. So I don't think this is going to change the market, and I don't want to put residents in a deficit situation, considering the Hempson report that we had last week. And I'm really hurt to say that we don't agree all that much.
Okay, any final questions or comments on the recommendation on the screen? Is there a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Eisses. I'll call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation on the screen? I'm going to have to see everybody's cards. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, all those opposed? That's defeated. Thank you. Now we'll move on to item 6.2, which is consideration of a resolution to hold a closed session meeting. A mover and a seconder for that recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Drodge and seconded by Councillor Zanella. All those in favor? That is carried. So those we're going to move into closed for probably, I'm guessing, any guess on the time? Probably about 20 to 30 minutes, I'm guessing. For those in the audience, we'll be back as soon as we can. And did I call the vote on that? All those in favor, just in case? That is carried. Thanks, and we'll move into closed session. Thank you. My sincere apologies for keeping people waiting. And we will reconvene. I'm looking for to the clerks for the next recommendation. That's fine. So we're at 6.2B, rise and report from the closed session meeting of June the 10th. Can I rise and report at 8:57 PM? Moved by Councillor Drodge, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? That is carried. And item 6.2C, which is the closed session item, that the confidential information received regarding 1194 and 1224 Bel-Air Beach Road DLR Holdings requests for inclusion of lands with the settlement area boundary be confirmed. Mover and a seconder, Deputy Mayor Fowler, and seconded by Councillor Constantine. All those in favor? That is carried. And the next item we have is item 262D. Do we have a mover and a seconder for this item? Moved by Councillor Drodge, seconded by Councillor Waters. Conversation on this item. Councillor Drodge.
Thanks, Your Worship. So this project is definitely different, to say the least, from any other settlement or proposed settlement addition. I'm basically, I pull this, I want to talk about it simply because I think more needs to be said with how this is going to proceed and if it should be in our settlement boundary area, and if we could work out a term sheet, and Mr. Geese there spoke earlier tonight about the term sheet we currently have in front of us, but maybe if we can hatch out some details of that term sheet, I think maybe we could move forward with this project. So I'd like to do an amendment if possible, and the amendment would basically be, if you could put that up for me. That that staff and legal counsel be directed to continue to negotiate on this term sheet with DLR Holdings and see where we go from there, instead of bringing them into the settlement boundary this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Waters.
Just a comment is that I think we're rewarding bad behavior in terms of allowing the continued this opportunity. Is that this developer has obstructed staff from doing their job and getting that drainage done on that property in hopes that we would come to this point to have this discussion. So I really don't like the idea of this, but it's council's will, and I just wanted to make that point. I think it's been bad behavior on the developer's point of view, and has put a gun to our heads to have this discussion. But I think we're going to go ahead with the official plan, and that I do appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that's maybe not the way I would frame it if I would respond to Councillor Waters. We all have our houses or lands that we own, we live, and we try to do what's best for ourselves first. That's just the way we are as humans, really, and I don't think the town's any different than that. But I would like to ask staff, we have not been able to get on the land to do some of these investigations around the drainage. What are our options to get that done? Because because that's leverage that the town does have. That's because we do need to look after our own self. So what are our options?
Director Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Through to Councillor Izes. So as the staff report speaks to, there are a total of 9 properties that are involved in the Bel Air Creek diversion flooding strategy. And we, through the legal team have had, and through the capital engineering team, have had discussions with all of those landowners over several years. The process that we've been undertaking to date is to enter into what's called permission to enter agreements, to have access to their property, to do the additional technical study work that's been required, and then access the properties to implement once the design is completed for the flooding strategy. And so when we don't obtain those permit to enter agreements, the next recourse for the town would be to pursue an expropriation process with those individual landowners.
Follow up, and then, so that wouldn't be just necessarily this property, that would be all the ones that are involved, even possibly the ones that we have been on and done studies on. Would that also include that?
Through you, Mayor Dolan, to Councillor Izes. So the 2 largest properties that are involved in this project, one has sort of the creek diversion, which is the DLR lands, and the property to the north, which then takes us up to the 6th line. That property is where the wetland diversion occurs, and we already have an agreement with that property owner in terms of the works that are necessary on that property and the studies that are required.
And so it probably goes without saying that there's a cost involved with expropriation for the town as well, and that that's a bit of a, it takes a bit of time to go through that.
Through you, Mayor Dolan, to Councillor Izes. So there is a legal cost to the town. There is compensation, which was already identified in the permit to enter agreements, and then the time required, and that process, can take up to a year, maybe longer, to go through that process.
Thank you for that. So I guess if I look at what's being proposed here, I think this is a, we're not shutting the door. We've had a term sheet that was presented to us. There's some opportunities there to possibly not have to go that route, and we're leaving it to the discussion open in this motion. So that would be my comment on this.
Deputy Fowler?
Thank you, Your Worship. Looking at this, I think we have to look beyond the narrow scope of what we're dealing with here. We have the town, which is a very large entity, and you have the developer, which is a very large entity, and there's this piece of land. And I myself, well, all of us on council, we come here to better the community as a whole. So to flat out say no, I think would be squaring off and ignoring the ripple effect this would have on the community surrounding it. Our job is to look out for our people. And in this situation, it is not just DLR and Town of Innisfil, it is the people of Bellevue, the flooding and everything else that's happened. So by having the negotiations on the term sheet, I think it gives DLR an opportunity to step up and show how sincere they are moving forward, that we can all benefit from this, not just, two people striking each other and then what do the residents get, right? We're actually looking to include them in the benefit here and how we can move forward. So I like the idea of the negotiation. Like I said, it gives DLR an opportunity. It gives the town an opportunity to sit down at the same table and figure out what's the best option. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor of the revised recommendation? That's carried. Next, we'll go to item 6.3, which is the Innisfil official plan update. Mover and a seconder, please to put the recommendation on the floor. Moved by Deputy Fowler, seconded by Councillor Saunders. questions or comments on the Innisfil Official Plan update? So I have a few questions just from earlier on from the delegations that we had. So my first question was in regards to 2108 Side Road 20, who mentioned earlier that they felt like they'd been singled out or excluded, and I just wondered if someone could speak to that property. No, sorry, it's staff's turn now.
Thank you, Mayor. In terms of a little bit of context, so the town did go through a comprehensive kind of growth options reporting, and that was undertaken mostly in 2025. Through that exercise, COPA 7 had identified a land need of approximately 104.2 hectares and no employment area. As you'll recall, we received 53 requests for privately initiated settlement boundary expansions, over 2,200 for community area, over 600 for employment area, and you went through a comprehensive process to evaluate what lands would come in and would not go be recommended. That process did rely on proponent-driven settlement boundary area requests, and so Area 9 did not include those lands that are being that were put forward this evening. They were not put forward at the time, notwithstanding the various different requests for proponent plans that might go along with any of those areas. There was no plan provided for this property, and that is why those lands have not been included at this time. That being said, the lands are adjacent to number 9, so it may satisfy similar criteria. We'd be happy to receive council direction on the area. But there also is possibly development constraints on the property, given the adjacency to the rail corridor and potential road expansions. So just something to consider. We did focus very much on the properties that did request and provide plans through this process to define that comprehensive strategy of what land came in, was recommending to be included, and that's why this area wasn't included at the time.
Okay, thank you. So would it be appropriate then to say if the owners were interested, they should contact the staff at the town to understand the process of how you would apply to have your lands included at some point? Director Lee?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I think both in terms of inclusion and then sort of being able to walk through, as Ms. Giancola has said, some of those limitations that are there. Even when we looked at parcel 9, there were limitations in terms of those setbacks and the amount of land that could actually be developed. So there are a number of constraints in that overall settlement area boundary expansion criteria that we would have to talk to them about, and then there would need to be some further evaluation for the lands and how much development land would actually be left through that process. But we'd be happy to talk them through that process.
Thank you. And then I also had a question about the policy changes requested on 5.7.11 on the 3 parcels by Parkbridge that was identified earlier. I think it was just adding, if somebody could explain that process.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. So this being an update to the town's official plan, in terms of project scope, we generally did not revisit area-specific policies. One of the requests made tonight was to sort of take policies that apply on specific blocks and apply those exact same policies on new geography. And generally speaking, the merits and rationale for that, we would expect would be considered more through a private official plan amendment rather than through the update to the town's official plan. So we did review the requests made. However, Sandy Cove is one of two sort of retirement areas with a very specific policy context that was included in the current 2018 official plan, and we've more or less carried that forward in what staff have proposed through this update. So where it was more site-specific in nature, our idea is that that should be considered more of a private application rather than through this update.
And my final question is in regards to the 6th line interchange. Do we have any, maybe I know this and I've forgotten it, do we have any idea when the province will be looking at moving forward with that?
Mayor Dolan, I'd have to look. I don't believe we've received any further updates from the province recently. Really, they had looked at the updated realignment and what the overlay overpasses would look like. They had updated that as part of their requirements, and that is now sort of concluded. But they would need provincial funding in terms of when they would actually move forward with any work, and we would be looking for that to align with sort of the widening work that would be a future project on the 6th line associated with the Orbit development.
Thank you. And I guess finally, I just want to say that it's been a process. If you think way back to the municipal comprehensive review work that was done by the county for COPA 7, and then how many years COPA 7 sat on the minister's desk, and yeah, it's been, and then our own work here definitely has been a long time too. The over application, I think now I know what the province feels like when they've got, $1 million to spend on a certain project and they get, $100 million of requests for it. Oversubscribed is the term they often use. And that's kind of how I feel what's happened to us throughout this process. And the number of phone calls and advocacy work from a number of people who have called that feel that their property should have been, it was overlooked, should have been included, had special circumstances why it was different than others. I think at this point, I'm happy to trust the work that staff has done, and there is opportunity if, I'm less fussed about adding employment versus adding residential, particularly if it's along the 400 corridor. But again, I'm not prepared to make any amendments, kind of knee-jerk amendments at this point. I'm happy with the work that staff have done, and if there's something that we've missed, they have the opportunity to contact staff to see why it wasn't included. So with those comments, I will I'll call for the vote. Sorry, go ahead, Director.
Sorry, Mayor Dolan. I did want to just speak to the motion that is on the screen, because you'll notice one particular section that is underlined that was not in the staff report. In finalizing the document, we did become aware on Schedule A1, I believe it still included an OLT lands under appeal, and that was inaccurate. So we've removed that on what will be the document that will go to the county for approval. And so that language is there. So if there are other sort of minor technical adjustments that are required in sending this to the county, that wording has been incorporated to allow us to do that, but we did want to bring that one to your attention as we found it moving forward.
Thank you for highlighting that. Okay, I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. And next we'll go to the confirming bylaw, which is item 7.1. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Drodge, seconded by Councillor Richardson, that confirming bylaw and adjournment happen at 9:16 p.m. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Sorry for all of the procedural gymnastics this evening, and we'll see you all on June the 24th at our next meeting.